There is a plant that produces 3 times more potassium than farmyard manure. It decomposes into liquid fertilizer in 3 weeks, no composting required. You can harvest it 5 times per year, and it lives for decades. A wheelchair-bound journalist spent 42 years proving it could replace commercial fertilizers entirely. And today, you cannot buy it at any garden center in the United States. Not because it was banned, not because it failed, but because it does not produce seeds. A $200 billion industry sells what this plant gives away for free. The archive opens in 1871 in a cramped study in Coggeshall, Essex, where a Quaker inventor named Henry Doubleday is reading the Journal of the Royal Agricultural Society of England. Henry was searching for something specific. He had invented a revolutionary adhesive for De La Rue, the royal printers of postage stamps. His gum could survive humid tropical shipping, yet stick perfectly when moistened. But gum Arabic supplies from Africa were unreliable. He needed an English-grown alternative. Reading Dr. Augusta Volker's article about a Russian plant called Symphytum asperumum, Henry spotted one word that stopped him cold: mucilaginous. That was exactly what he needed. What Henry did next seems almost impossible. He wrote a letter addressed simply to the head gardener at the palace in St. Petersburg, Russia. No name, no specific address, just a title and a city. Astonishingly, it arrived. Catherine the Great had decreed that her head gardeners must always be English or Scottish. When the letter reached the palace, an Englishman read it. Rather than disturb his established plants, he walked to a patch where 2 comfrey species grew side by side. There, between the rows, he found seedlings, hybrids. He dug them up and sent them west. These were F1 crosses between Symphytum officinale and Symphytum asperum. They displayed extraordinary vigor, growing faster and larger than either parent. The Russians called them Russian comfrey. The English would eventually call them the most useful plant in the garden. The plant was called comfrey. Henry lost the De La Rue contract when his comfrey gum failed to stick stamps properly. But what he found instead changed his purpose entirely. Moved deeply by the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, Henry believed this vigorous hybrid could prevent starvation worldwide. He spent the next 30 years researching its potential as fodder, fertilizer, and food. He was offered fellowship of the Royal Horticultural Society, but was too poor to afford the £12 registration fee. When he died at 92, his relatives decided to tidy up. His nephew Thomas and niece Edith took 2 days to clear his rooms. They stuffed everything into sacks. Then they burned it all. 30 years of research notes, 30 years of observations, 30 years of a Quaker's dream to feed a hungry world. Incinerated. But one man refused to let Henry Doubleday's dream die. 77 years later, a gardening journalist named Lawrence Hills saw a steel engraving of comfrey in a seed catalogue. What he said next would consume 4 decades of his life. In the autumn of 1948, Lawrence Donegan Hills sat in his Uncle Gordon Saunders' study, leafing through an old Sutton's Farm seeds catalogue. He stopped at a steel engraving of a plant with large, rough leaves and drooping bell-shaped flowers. His uncle mentioned casually that it supposedly grew 100 tons per acre. Hills would later write, "From that day to this, I have never lived further away from a comfrey plant than 100 feet, and more than any woman has, this crop has changed my life." He called it the flying saucer of agriculture, a plant constantly cited, briefly discussed, then dismissed by researchers who are always prejudiced against it. Hills understood what it meant to be dismissed by conventional systems. He suffered from coeliac disease, which left him wheelchair-bound until his wife Hilda Cherry Hills, a nutritionist, introduced him to a wheat-free diet. He knew from personal experience that orthodox agriculture had failed human health. This strange, overlooked plant felt like kindred. In December 1954, Hills moved to Bocking, Essex. He bought a suburban, semi-detached house at 20 Convent Lane, built in 1939. He leased 3/4 of an acre of poor clay and stony sand for £10 per year. The land was covered in matted grass. It was unpromising soil for an ambitious experiment, but Hills planted anyway. He gathered 21 distinct cultivars from farms across Britain: the Newman Turner strain from Fern Farm, the Stevenson strain from Yorkshire, the Webster strain imported from Russia in 1900, and what he called survivals, plants still growing in hedgerows around Coggeshall, where Henry Doubleday had once worked. He named each cultivar Bocking, followed by a number. Why Bocking? Because, like Kodak, he said, Bocking can be said in any language. Where a Spanish grower might say Variedad Cuatro, every gardener on earth could say Bocking. That same year, Hills founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association, naming it after the Quaker, whose work had been burned. His guiding question for every project was, would Henry Doubleday, the friend of agriculture, have thought it a worthy project? The organization grew into the largest organic gardening charity in Europe. By 1987, their television series, All Muck and Magic, drew 3.5 million viewers weekly. The Prince of Wales became patron in 1988. But at its heart, the HDRA was always about one thing: completing the work Henry Doubleday started, proving that this plant could do what both men believed. Over 8 years, Hills and his father measured every harvest to the pound. What they discovered should have revolutionized organic gardening. Instead, it was nearly forgotten. Lawrence Hills was obsessive about accuracy. He wrote that he was prepared to believe the man who produces a list of plant-by-plant weights for 5 or 6 cuts that add up to 95 tons, 700 weight and 13 pounds, or 102 tons, 100 weight 9 pounds, but not the man who produces a round figure of 100 tons an acre. His numbers were never round. From 1954 to 1962, Hills conducted systematic field trials on 3/4 of an acre of mediocre Essex soil. 21 cultivars, 8 years, every cut weighed, every measurement recorded by hand with his father, W.D. Hills, Bachelor of Science. When he analyzed the potash content of each cultivar, one number stood out. Bocking number 14 measured 7.09% potash, the highest of all 21 varieties tested. Bocking number 4, a close competitor in yield, measured only 5.04%. This was not a marginal difference. This was a different category of plant. Then Hills compared wilted Russian comfrey against farmyard manure, the gold standard of organic fertilizer. Comfrey delivered 1.19% potash. Farmyard manure delivered 0.32%. Comfrey contained nearly 3 times more potassium than what farmers had used for centuries. He tested further, comparing comfrey tea, the liquid fertilizer made by steeping leaves in water, against Tomerite, a leading commercial product. Comfrey tea delivered 0.0340% potash. Tomerite delivered 0.0139%, 2.5 times more potassium than the commercial alternative. But potassium was only part of the discovery. Hills found something else that explained why comfrey decomposed so remarkably fast. Ordinary garden waste has a carbon to nitrogen ratio around 80 to 1. Finished compost, what gardeners spend months creating, targets a ratio of 10 to 1. That ratio determines how quickly material breaks down. Comfrey starts at 9.8 to 1, already at optimal composting ratio before decomposition even begins. Combined with 75% water content and low fiber, comfrey leaves dissolve into dark, nutrient-rich liquid in approximately 3 weeks. No turning, no balancing greens and browns, no waiting. His final yield numbers for Bocking 14 were 33 tons 1,400 weight and 15 pounds per acre per year, averaged across 5 years. Each plant produced approximately 12 pounds of biomass annually, 4 to 5 harvests per growing season. And because Bocking 14 was sterile, producing flowers but no viable seeds, it could never become invasive. Hills had identified something extraordinary, a fertilizer factory that outperformed manure, decomposed faster than compost, never spread beyond where you planted it, and lasted essentially forever. He summarized it simply. A comfrey bed is in effect a method of exchanging crude nitrogen for a balanced organic fertilizer. So why can you not walk into any garden center in America and buy this plant today? Here is what makes comfrey different from other plants in this series. No one classified it as a weed. No agricultural agency launched an eradication campaign. No herbicide was engineered specifically to kill it. Comfrey vanished through a stranger path, regulatory confusion, and retail incompatibility. The timeline begins in the late 1970s. Scientific research identified pyrrolizidine alkaloids, naturally occurring compounds in comfrey roots, as potential liver toxins. In 1978, Hirono and colleagues conducted carcinogenicity bioassays in rats. In 1985, Ridker and colleagues documented hepatic veno-occlusive disease linked to comfrey tea consumption, published in Gastroenterology. Then came July 6, 2001. The FDA issued an advisory letter recommending removal of all comfrey dietary supplements from the market. The FTC followed with enforcement action against companies marketing comfrey for internal use. What did the FDA actually restrict? Comfrey dietary supplements intended for internal consumption. Products marketed for oral use, suppository use, or application to open wounds. Pills and teas made from roots, which contain 10 times more alkaloids than leaves. What remained completely legal? Growing comfrey as a garden plant, using it as external fertilizer, mulch, compost, liquid feed. Topical products with appropriate warnings. There was no ban on growing Bocking 14 for fertilizer. None. But something else happened. Something the regulators did not intend. Bocking 14 is sterile. It produces flowers but no viable seeds. Propagation is only possible through root cuttings, pieces of root that sprout new plants when buried. The entire big box retail model is built around seed packets and potted plants shipped from centralized nurseries. Root cuttings require specialized handling that does not fit standardized shipping trays or retail logistics. Home Depot and Lowe's combined control approximately 47% of the plant retail market. These stores partner with mass production nurseries requiring products that fit standard systems. A plant without seeds cannot sit in a rack. A plant that requires root division cannot be grown in plug trays by the million. And there is another problem. Annual flowers require repeat purchases every year. Bags of fertilizer require repeat purchases every season. A perennial that eliminates the need for fertilizer forever has zero repeat purchase potential. The global fertilizer market exceeds $200 billion annually. Chemical fertilizers alone account for $140 to $200 billion, controlled by companies like Nutrien, Yara International, the Mosaic Company, and CF Industries. American farmers spent $24.4 billion on fertilizer in 2020 alone. You cannot patent a plant that has existed for centuries. You cannot create dependency on a perennial that propagates itself from root fragments. You cannot sell seed packets for a sterile hybrid. They did not ban it. The FDA action targeted internal consumption, not garden cultivation. They did not spray it. No herbicide campaign ever targeted comfrey. They simply stopped stocking it because a plant without seeds cannot be sold in a rack, and a plant that lasts forever cannot generate repeat purchases. They let the confusion spread. When consumers heard the words liver damage and FDA warning, they assumed the plant itself was dangerous to grow. They erased it through market structure, not malice. Within 5 years of the 2001 advisory, comfrey had virtually vanished from mainstream retail, but it never stopped growing in the gardens of those who knew its secret. In 2005, Paul Alfrey and his wife Sophie Roberts left South London with their 2 young sons. Paul had worked as an arborist, climbing trees and wielding chainsaws. They moved to rural Bulgaria, to a small town near Shipka Pass in the Balkan Mountains. In 2010, they founded the Balkan Ecology Project. Today, Paul has comfrey planted next to every fruit tree in their market garden. He has become one of the world's most prolific comfrey educators, writing detailed guides on establishment and management that reach gardeners across 6 continents. He supplied 1,000 Bocking 14 root cuttings to Oxygenesis in Germany for carbon capture experiments. Paul says the plant is his first port of call if he ever needs to dress a wound. He says to take a few leaves, brush them together to remove the hairs, wrap them around the wound, and apply light pressure. He finds it incredibly effective. 5,000 miles away in Trumansburg, New York, Sean Dembrowski established edible acres on his parents' 6 acres of marginal land. His introduction to permaculture came from a weekend course with Dave Jackie on edible food forests. Sean sells Bocking 14 at $7 per plant. He frequently sells out. He creates YouTube tutorials on comfrey propagation and donates trees and plants to community food forest projects across the Finger Lakes region. He says the narrative not presented outwardly by the media is that there is a huge increase of people growing more food and medicine for their community and their families right where they live. And that is a good reason for optimism. Garden Organic, the organization Lawrence Hills founded and still legally named the Henry Doubleday Research Association, conducted a survey in 2018. The results revealed the underground persistence of comfrey knowledge. 94% of respondents grow comfrey. 64% have grown it for more than 10 years. 37% have grown it for more than 30 years. 44% obtained their original plants from Garden Organic or its predecessor, HDRA. The original Bocking trial site, the 3/4 acre of poor clay where Hills spent 8 years measuring yields, is now a housing development. They called it Doubleday Gardens. At Ryton Gardens in Coventry, Garden Organic maintains the National Collection of Comfrey, with over 30 varieties awarded by Plant Heritage. It is the genetic legacy Hills spent his life preserving. On the Permies.com forums, a user named Derek Clawson posted that he had lost his comfrey to root rot after moving to a flood-prone location. Within hours, another member offered to dig and send a root, saying they had even saved a few small USPS boxes to send plants. Lawrence Hills founded the DRAA because he was determined that the work he began on comfrey in 1948 should not be destroyed. Henry Doubleday's notes were burned. Hills refused to let his own work meet the same fate. The Grassroots network of permaculture practitioners, small nurseries, and forum members mailing root cuttings in small boxes is what preservation looks like when the retail system fails. The plant still works, the knowledge survived, and you can grow it yourself. Look for a plant that grows up to 6 feet tall and spreads 2 to 3 feet wide. The leaves are large, lance-shaped, deep green, and covered in rough hairs that can irritate skin, so wear gloves when handling. The flowers are light lavender to lilac purple, bell-shaped, and hang in curved clusters. The critical identification feature is that Bocking 14 has wingless stems. True comfrey, Symphytum officinale, has distinctive wings of leaf tissue running down the stem. Russian comfrey does not. This is how you know you have the correct cultivar. It flowers. It does not produce viable seeds. That sterility is your confirmation. In the United Kingdom, Comfrey UK sells 8 root cuttings for £16. Foundation stock descended from HDRA 1999. Doubledays and Suttons carry stock from the garden organic lineage. In the United States, Strictly Medicinal Seeds offers certified organic plants. Edible Acres in Trumansburg, New York, sells them for $7 each. Redemption. Permaculture ships 10 root cuttings with free delivery. To make comfrey tea, fill a bucket 1/3 full with chopped leaves. Add water and weigh the leaves down with a brick. Cover and steep for 3 to 6 weeks. Faster in warm weather. Strain and dilute 1 part tea to 10 parts water before applying to soil around tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and fruit trees. Or simply chop and drop. Cut the leaves 2 inches above the ground and lay them directly around your plants as mulch. The nutrients release as the leaves decompose. No bucket, no waiting, no smell. 2 cautions. Do not consume comfrey internally. The pyrrolizidine alkaloids that triggered the FDA advisory can cause liver damage with repeated ingestion. And think carefully before planting. Once established, comfrey is nearly impossible to remove. Root fragments sprout new plants. Choose your location as if it were permanent, because it will be. The paradox resolves simply. Bocking 14 was never banned. It never stopped working. It just stopped fitting the business model. A plant that produces free fertilizer forever cannot generate repeat sales. A sterile hybrid cannot be sold in seed packets. A solution that requires no inputs threatens an industry worth $200 billion. Lawrence Hills devoted 42 years to proving this plant could replace commercial fertilizers. Henry Doubleday spent 30 years believing it could prevent famine. Their work was nearly lost, burned, ignored, and confused with a toxicity scare that had nothing to do with garden fertilizer. Now you know. The knowledge survives in small nurseries, permaculture forums, and in the hands of gardeners who share root cuttings through the mail. Every plant you grow is a vote against the system that erased it. Every cutting you share preserves what hills fought to save. Grow it, share it. The free fertilizer factory is still open.